Okay, so today we're going to be talking about thriving in a programmatic world. What does that mean? So we've heard a lot about challenges today. We also want to talk about some of the opportunities as well. So hopefully when we go into lunch, we're going to leave you with some really good ideas about where the opportunities are for the future. Can we just start, first of all, with each of you giving a quick introduction of who you are and what you do? Mitch?
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Mitch Waters. I'm General Manager of the Trade Desk Australia and New Zealand. We're omni-channel independent DSP.
I'm Russell Young, MD for APAC at Sojourn. We basically are a travel data-driven marketing business, and my role's basically been to build the business across the APAC region.
Hi, I'm Phil. Hello, everyone. Nice to see familiar faces in the crowd. I am APAC Chief Commercial Officer for Unruly, and we are the biggest premium video marketplace in Asia Pacific.
Hi everyone, I'm Yen Cheong. I'm the head of Cadron for APAC, part of IPG Media Brands, and I have worked with every one of you here at this panel on behalf of our clients.
Okay, great. So we've heard a lot today about the duopoly and a lot of the challenges in the industry. We also want to then talk about what are the positive opportunities too. But first, let's of all start with, okay, what's the role and importance of independent ad tech in this environment where we see so much of the industry dominated by the duopoly? Mitch, can I start with you?
Yeah, certainly. So every single presentation this morning and for the last 2 years have had the word transparency front and center in that. And if you look at a bunch of research that eMarketer put out recently, brands and advertisers are being far more aggressive in requesting and demanding actually transparency in their business through the supply chain. I think something like 82% of brands are looking, or if not, have already put in clauses for additional audit rights, or 79% have asked to include clauses around essentially what a rebate return. So there's been a lot of work going into cleaning up the supply chain and talking and addressing that transparency discussion. And it's largely lied around rates from arbitrage. And we're doing a lot of really, really good things like ads.txt, and obviously GDPR helps from a transparency of a data rights perspective. But we actually believe there's one key area of transparency that doesn't get the airtime it really deserves, and it's objectivity. So how do I look at what is at every decision that I have for my client, whether it be a brand, a publisher, a data provider, how do I know that I'm making the best decision for that brand, that publisher, that data provider, rather than the best decision essentially for my business? So we're seeing in the ecosystem media owners owning tech businesses. We're seeing tech businesses representing both sides of equations. And I'm definitely not calling people out saying they are doing it, but it leads the opportunity that could be happening. So independent providers in the technology space, we offer that objectivity. So our trade desk clients that are advertisers and brands know that every single impression that we look to buy for them is the best impression for them. There's no, we don't have to service any publisher relationships, and we also don't have any of our own inventory to sell. So we're 100% objective on getting the right impression for them.
Okay, isn't that also then the role of the agency, Yen?
Well, I mean, definitely from our perspective, I think that dominance is not as important as relevance. So I think our role, certainly as you put, is to actually play that aggregator role, play that, I guess, whether it's, you call it objectivity, but it's also basically, it is subjective to what the advertisers' objectives are. So basically, if we are actually be able to put the clients first or put the objectives first, then it is about looking at what is that balanced media mix. And I always say that, we've spoken about frenemies, we've spoken about tech being fragmented. I think that's also one of the fact that we need to, as an agency, support clients firstly in evaluating the tech, understanding the inventory, understanding the data. In fact, it is so confusing. And I would say that most of the time, our clients actually look to, I guess, the bigger players. I think someone earlier said that, it might be a bit of laziness. I would also say it's a bit of lack of education. Because I think sometimes, it is true that the likes of Facebook and Google will never go off the plan. but it is about how we balance that out with, like I said, relevance. I mean, especially in APAC, we are really working with a region with multiple languages, a lot of very local relevant inventory. So it is about, for me, the fact that, independent players, like the gentleman on this panel, the thing is about how do we position their product, their offering, their tag as a value to our advertisers, in addition to the fact that they want to invest in Google and Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was interesting, one of the earlier publishers mentioned that actually they were starting to see a bit of a shift in that there was a movement more towards the independent players. I don't know, do any of you guys have a perspective on this? Are you seeing a positive trend, or is it still very much a lot of the investments going into the duopoly?
Well, I think it's even more concentrated in this part of the world than in the US, for example, or the West. I mean, I speak to my colleagues, and I think, Facebook and Google's kind of share of digital dollar in the West is a lot less than the share of digital dollar here. I think the stats are anywhere between 65 and 80% in this part of the world. And I think, you just have to look at macro stuff that's happening and try and correlate it. And I think that's something we're not very good at as an industry. So, there's some stats floating around that advertising effectiveness has halved in the last 5 years, as against the backdrop of a concentration of spend going into, I'd say, user-generated content has increased. And I don't think this is necessarily an argument of independent tech versus, kind of big platform tech. I think this is about environment. This is about media, and this is about consumers. And I know that when I'm on social, I'm just in skim mode, skimming around, looking at stuff. When I'm reading an article, I'm in lean forward mode, and there's, neuroscience that proves, brain receptivity when you're reading an article is much higher, and memory encoding is a lot higher than when you're just skimming social or general free browsing. So I think we're in a world where we've got to rebalance our exposure as a brand to user-generated content versus our exposure to premium.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, and I find this with a lot of the work that we do with clients too, that you see there's such a focus on technology rather than the marketing science and what the actual objectives are of the client and what you're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, I would also say that as partners, we need to actually do a better job in actually communicating about programmatic. I think recently programmatic we've been getting quite hard hit about, the fact that, about all this brand safety. I mean, I do have, I guess advertisers, that as out of a knee-jerk reaction, they might say, oh, you know what? Oh, okay, suddenly we hear about brand safety. Even the bigger players are having problems with that. Let's pull back. It is also a challenge for us to say that programmatic is not just a so-called channel, so to speak. And we did talk about F-Form earlier, said that it's a methodology. I mean, to a degree, it is an overarching strategy. It is actually looking at that whole entire integrated comms solution. So programmatic plays a role. And I would be very open to say to any clients, where if programmatic doesn't play a role, it will not get on your plan. I think there has been this mindset about, this is land grab, right? Everything must go to programmatic. I mean, I do know that it is growing, but I would also say that, some of our clients get really skeptical because, we look at the stats. Programmatic is skyrocketed in terms of, the sales, so to speak. But then they sometimes just even silo that performance out, just to say, how is this programmatic doing for my campaign as versus how is it contributing to that as a whole?
Absolutely.
So setting KPIs is really important, and that is also our role to work alongside these guys to really understand where they deliver to that outcome, and then how we actually also communicate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Russell, I'd like to get your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I think there's been quite a lot of talk around, walled gardens and sort of independent tech versus the duopoly. From our perspective, we wouldn't see it that way. I think, we certainly operate within the walled gardens. We've got some, partnerships with both Google and Facebook. And for us, they represent the ecosystem. They represent tech platforms and access to kind of inventory sources. But I think where we play a part is through kind of deep insights, through travel expertise, some unique data sets, and our ability to really be able to engage with consumers, at a one-to-one level through those different outlets. And so for us, that's kind of the role that the duopoly play, rather than us trying to position ourselves as separate to what they're offering themselves.
Yeah, I think actually, and I'd like to bring up something that you and I spoke about beforehand, that, you as a business looked I think you were saying sort of 4 years ago you looked at maybe developing out your own DSP solution and you decided actually it wasn't the right thing to do at the time. Maybe if you can just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like a lot of independent tech players, there's sort of a kind of initial stage where you look to sort of build out your own sort of tech systems. Certainly on the back end, we've continued to do that, but I think on the front end, it became sort of apparent, 4 or 5 years ago, that at a strategic level, you were going to make life very difficult for yourselves, given the army of engineers that the likes of Google and Facebook have at their disposal. And actually, is that kind of a core strategy for you, or should you actually be, focusing on what you can do in-house in terms of, like I said, at the back end, in terms of the ingesting, strong data and building out algorithms around that. And so, we made a strategic decision to kind of focus on those aspects, and I think it's worked well, so far.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on this idea because I like this, this focus on or recognition of, okay, so this is what's happening in this industry. These are the challenges we face, but actually that's just the way it is. How do we work within that? Where are the opportunities? I'd like to get the perspective of all of you on that.
Well, I think from my perspective, I think clients are sitting on a very rich minefield in the sense that actually what's going to be very valuable to them is their first-party data. So regardless of whether we're working with walled gardens or more open players, I think it is about on the client side. I think a lot of times we find that clients are actually holding on to a lot of data. They don't necessarily understand how to organize, how to monetize, which also means that the conversation needs to go beyond just the media manager, goes beyond just the marketing manager. It is really helping them understand that, hey, okay, we might be working with walled gardens. I mean, walled garden is not a new concept. As we know, some markets are dominant, with walled garden platform partners. But the whole idea is that if you're investing in these partners, there has to be a way for you to make sure that whatever it is, whether it's campaign data, whether it is the data you collect from a result of your consumers interacting with you, then how do we then bring that back into the planning process, back into the execution? So I would say that the environment is going to continue to change this way. I mean, we've seen a lot of different ways of working. So sometimes they're open, sometimes they're closed. Maybe at some point they might open up again. Who knows, right? But I would also say that for advertisers, for agencies, we do have the negotiation muscle. I think at some point we need to band together and realize that how do we actually effect some influence in how we want to be engaging with these partners? Because I don't think it's a closed conversation. I think nobody likes to be so-called held at ransom, right? So in a way, I would say that, if we recognize that, hey, where is the money going? Right? If we are able to say to some of these partners, and certainly, we feel in Unruly, we had some partnership with some key clients before, whereby we went in and say, let's educate our own markets. And this is why when I said earlier that dominance is not as important as relevance, it is also making sure that our local teams understand the value some of these partners bring and able to have a conversation with our clients locally to say, hey, you might have a regional contract with these big players, you might even have a global contract. But how does that balance out with the other players that's as important? How do you even out that playing field?
Yeah, Phil, I'd like to pass this to you next.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it comes back to Mitch's point about objectivity, right? We can either live in a world of media inputs where we just fixate on spurious metrics like cost per reach, or we can start look at using and working with the ecosystem to understand outcomes and actual business results. And I think, if you are putting if you're putting a 2-minute video through a social platform where you only get a 2-second view, that is not objective media planning. No. That is distorted media planning. But if you've made a fit for purpose 3 or 5 second creative that is there to do that job, and I think this is the problem that clients have. There's so much jargon. There's so much they get bombarded all the day. When they think about programmatic, they just get hit with a load of acronyms from media practitioners like ourselves. There's more expertise in the region than there is in local markets, so this requires education. So I think this requires this collaborative approach because more and more decision-making is now going down to local in terms of the local brand manager teams and stuff deciding on where to put media spend. And we have to go and show them that $1 in each environment is not the same. And certainly from a video point of view, this doesn't only impact media, it impacts creative. So we have to be using the data that comes in back into the pipe about how this influences future creative direction, so that we understand the role of Facebook from a video perspective is a response and a reminder platform, because it gives you 2 to 5 seconds. But you don't build a brand in 2 to 5 seconds. So where is, the upper funnel, which platforms do I use to build brands? And which platforms do I use to remind people that my brand is here while they're on their mobile phone and they can pop in and get an offer? And I think the issue is that everybody is positioning their platform and their media to be able to do every job in the funnel, which it doesn't. And so we just need to understand the role of different types of assets in different types of media environments and how that works together.
So there's actually an opportunity for all of us involved in tech to do a better job at explaining or guiding clients through the marketing plan.
Let's make it more human.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I would just raise an example. We actually have done some, I would say, some analysis, quite deep dive analysis with some of our clients, whereby, as what Phil has said, we look across the buys, over a period of time, and we also are able to identify that, okay, we have been buying across these multiple platforms, but which ones are actually really delivering that effectiveness? So it's not even just about costs. So I know that, clients obviously want savings, they want costs, but the whole idea is that, again, costs is important, but it is the effectiveness, and when I say effectiveness, is also we should measure the immediate so-called achievement of KPIs, but also to the mid and long-term goals. About how is this platform partner working with us to enable us to potentially, for example, make sure that we actually are able to collate some learnings, to make sure we're able to pilot some trials. I think that's also something that we need to be able to actually work with partners. And of course, for me, is more not just about the independence. It's really about, even with the Googles and Facebook of the world, it's to really say that, okay, we're going to work together with you. Yep. But apart from just the buy, we want to know what's the relationship beyond that single buy. Because it's about continuity, it's about learning about the platform, it's about getting the sense of which partner is working best for prospecting, or is it a remarketing, or so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think the data and the feedback loop that is required both to power all our businesses, especially the agencies' businesses, as rates become commoditized and IP is stuck in a transient human capital. The problem is, in the recent moves, basically since Cambridge Analytica and then GDP, the walls aren't getting higher. They're building a moat around these walls as well. And so that data portability is becoming a lot harder to do that really interesting stuff, where agencies and brands that really want to offer, dive into that a little bit deeper, do offline attribution, that need that bid level information, that's going away.
So does that just mean then that it's far more important than ever for brands to have that direct-to-consumer relationship rather than necessarily working through partners?
No, I don't think so. I think you're always going to need Facebook and YouTube and Google on a plan. That's 100% correct. Maybe not 80%, but working with partners that give you the ability to add that IP through that feedback loop is super important. Since basically Cambridge Analytica and all the duopolies making these big changes, agency partners, certainly in Australia, are looking to work out what that means for their proprietary tools that they've built internally. And any sort of audience segmentation, audience analysis, internal attribution, do they want to just hand that off to the duopoly and get a report back on what that looks like without being able to have a point of differentiation from a different holding group? So I think there's definitely a place for the duopoly, and a very big place, but I think 20% for the rest of us is probably under-indexing, considering where you see how this ecosystem needs to thrive.
Okay, so then, that's the current picture. Where are the opportunities? Where's maybe Russell? What do you think is the greatest opportunity?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is kind of a convergence of lots of different platforms. I think, as we're seeing, rather than trying to do everything yourself. I think recognizing that there is a widespread ecosystem out there, and by understanding what the consumer needs are and your ability to be able to kind of establish one-to-one engagement with consumers, irrespective of the platform that they're using, there's a lot of opportunity then for your marketing partners to really be able to provide a sort of full funnel service, and certainly that's kind of the direction that we've been heading in, and building out from what was sort of performance display into kind of a product, multi-channel strategy. So whether that's Facebook, whether that's YouTube, whether that's cross-device, it's really about using those platforms to be able to engage at a one-to-one level, but making those buying decisions based on the data that you've got flowing through to you to ensure that you're actually targeting the right people with the right message.
Okay. What about, we've seen there's been a bit of research that's come out this year around the rise of take-up of programmatic guaranteed, for instance, across markets across Southeast Asia. Perspective on that? Phil, looks like you have a perspective.
I think you look at header bidding and the promise of header bidding, which is every impression is biddable. If you've got great first-party data from your clients and you've ingested that into your kind of agency DMP, and then you've lookaliked that, you should be able to make a really good decision on which impression is important to you and pay a fair market rate for that. And in that world, the person who has the best data should be able to bid on the right impression and pay the most for it, right? So that's the world of header bidding. It feels like in some ways Programmatic Guaranteed almost goes against that from a kind of publisher perspective, because they are effectively ring fencing bits of content, whether it's a particular format or a particular audience, before it goes to the auction. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I think they can work together. So as in the US, for example, big FMCG brands, they want to know they can execute programmatic with certainty. They want to know, I want to get this much reach per day against this audience, and I'm willing to pay for it. So it creates certainty for the advertiser, because they know that they're going to be able to hit a certain frequency and reach. It creates certainty for the publisher, because they know their most valuable inventory has been pre-optioned and they're going to get something up front for that. And for the DSP, it gives them more functionality, that they know that they can deliver a particular KPI for a client. So I think Programmatic Guaranteed is a path in an evolution. I don't think it's like the future necessarily, but it's a really important step because it creates certainty for the ecosystem, including the agencies. And we've seen it in the US that, with our emotional targeting product, for example, there are certain clients that want to be synonymous with emotions, and they say, okay, I want to take all of your happy impressions before anyone else takes them, because I want my brand to be synonymous with happiness, and I've built a video that is there to be happy. So that is matching the mood of the video to the mood of the user. And that leads to big uplifts. So I think we don't just think about have Programmatic Guaranteed in terms of going, okay, I'm going to roadblock this particular channel of your website, because that's quite old school. Yeah. It can be along a lot more axes than that, and it can be a lot more sophisticated than that. And I think these big FMCGs always lead the way. And if they're spending millions and millions of dollars on Programmatic Guaranteed video in the US, it is going to come here whether we like it or not.
And we can already see, actually, in some markets like India, for instance, there are examples of it leapfrogging, where publishers particularly are just going straight to Programmatic Guaranteed as a way to really drive business. We actually do need to wrap it up because it's almost lunchtime. But Phil, you mentioned that that's just one potential opportunity. I'd love to get each of you just to provide one thing to the audience that you think this is it. This is the thing that you've got to be amongst as a greatest opportunity for them.
Well, I'll jump in first, and I just want to just add a build to what Phil has said, is that basically whether it's Programmatic Guaranteed or whatever, it is a mode of trading. So I think with clients, they want us to be partner agnostic. That's when clients choose us, they say, you're partner agnostic, you're going to help me make those decisions. And I think, again, we don't want to introduce so many jargons that also it confuses clients. Of course, Programmatic Guarantee delivers a certain benefits to some clients that can absolutely fulfill that. So, of course, that's something that we bring to the table, not because, it's a new up and rising thing that we should be doing. So I guess my one piece of advice is really to go slow to go fast. And what I mean by that is that as clients, as agencies, as advertisers, and obviously working with partners, we need to make sure that the fundamentals are in place. We need to make sure the clients are investing in ad serving, in brand safety, viewability where it's relevant, etc., to actually get a really good discipline of measurement. Now, by doing that, we can then make sure that whatever data we're going to be able to leverage moving forward. So again, sometimes, like I said, we actually risk the so-called value of what we can get as the output by saying that, okay, you know what, I want this campaign to go live in, overnight, when we don't have the benefits of testing, of making sure the creative is in the right place, and so on and so forth. So I think that's my overarching.
Get the fundamentals right.
Yeah.
First. Okay. All right. Phil?
I just think we just need to take the jargon out of programmatic and talk about matching brand personality and the relevance of brand videos to the right consumer at the right time, and it's just another mode of buying. So I think that for us is the key thing, because clients get scared. Facebook and Google are very good at talking in human language and talking about human stories. Facebook always bring their products down to a particular person on their platform who did a thing at a certain time and use that to tell a story. And then we start talking about DSP, SSP, header bidding, all these acronyms, and it scares people. So I just think we just need to try and take that out as much as possible and start telling human stories about data and media.
Okay, great. Russell?
I would say it's about quality over quantity. I think there's been just such an emergence of so many different channels in the last few years. I think whether it's Programmatic Guaranteed or whether it's GDPR, cleaning up sort of data compliancy, I see these all as sort of steps towards actually just improving the quality of what's available. And I think if you're on the right side of the fence, then I think you're in a great position to be able to capitalise on that. And if you're not, then probably worrying times ahead.
Okay. Mitch, last word with you.
Overarching theme or predictions?
One final piece of advice.
Definitely consider objectivity as part of your transparency framework. Like, if you're spending a whole bunch of money on multiple vendors through the supply chain, which there's a good chance you are, have a thought to whose clients they may be, or you may be for them. Are you their only subset of client, or how does that dichotomy work?
Okay, great. Thank you very much to our panelists. Some good food for thought for lunch. Enjoy.